I am absolutely going to testify. I won't even say his name. He is an evil being and is going to pay.
Combmes allegedly planned and controlled the sex performances, which he called freak-offs, and he often electronically recorded them. The freak-offs sometimes lasted days at a time.
The courtroom fell silent, anticipation thick enough to cut with a knife. All eyes were on Sean Diddy Combs, the music mogul who'd swaggered in just hours before, projecting cool composure. But that facade was about to shatter in the most public, dramatic way imaginable, triggered by an unexpected figure from his past. What unfolded next wasn't just a legal proceeding, it was a raw, exposed moment that shocked everyone present, including the judge.
I think that I was just, living in this shame, living in all this sort of stuff of my past, and I wasn't able to move on. It was hard for me being that young and being in the industry and not knowing where to turn, and everyone, telling me they loved me and, just turn their back on you in a second.
Day 2 had started with an unnerving calm that felt anything but normal. Diddy arrived surrounded by his expensive legal team, projecting confidence, but something was off. His eyes darted constantly, scanning the room as if expecting someone to jump out. Security seemed unusually heavy too, with extra guards positioned near Diddy's table. Not the typical setup for a celebrity trial. One guard stood directly behind his chair, another by the aisle, almost as if they'd received a chilling premonition of trouble. Then Cassie Ventura entered, drawing every gaze. She was understated in a simple black dress with a white collar, a quiet statement amid the rising tension. Her friends formed a protective circle around her, escorting her to her seat like a loyal guard. The contrast was stark, Diddy with hired muscle, Cassie with genuine support. Adding to the strange atmosphere, Diddy couldn't stop checking his phone. He'd pull it out, thumb scrolling furiously, each glance seeming to deepen the scowl on his face. At one point, his lawyer, looking increasingly concerned, actually reached over and gently took the device from his hand. That's when many noticed Diddy's hand was visibly shaking.
I think the person that the you of them was on a path of self-destruction.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I would have, for sure, 100%. Yeah. It would have been no bueno. It was bad. I don't know if I'd be alive, for sure. It was dark. So I'm very, very grateful to have influences in my life that have played a huge part in me seeing their relationship with Jesus and their relationship with their wives and their relationship with their kids and saying that's what I want. But I want to definitely tell my story so that if that resonates to anybody, that they can hopefully. But yeah, just protecting those moments because people take for granted encounters and
The prosecution team also seemed to be operating on a different frequency. They passed notes, whispered behind folders, shared screens on tablets, nodding in that knowing way that screamed, "We have a plan." Diddy's main lawyer made several attempts to calm him, leaning in, whispering, even placing a hand on his shoulder, but Diddy repeatedly shrugged him off, once so forcefully the lawyer had to brace himself against the table. When the judge finally entered, her expression mirrored the room's unease. Gone was the relaxed business air of day 1. Today, she looked like a principal bracing for a major disruption. Her eyes locked onto Diddy's table immediately, and she whispered something to her clerk, who then picked up a phone. What they didn't know was that Diddy had seen something just moments before court started, something that would ignite the powder keg he was sitting on. His team tried to hide his phone, but it was already too late. The bailiff called court to order, the words slicing through the palpable tension. Even the jurors seemed confused, glancing at each other, sensing the heightened emotions. One juror, clearly affected, asked for water, her hand trembling as she accepted the cup. Diddy sat rigid, his leg bouncing frantically under the table, a prominent vein throbbing in his forehead. His lawyer attempted to place legal documents before him, a silent plea for focus, but Diddy just pushed them away. He stared straight ahead, his breathing becoming noticeably heavy, like a man struggling to contain a physical force. The room held its collective breath, watching the clock tick, knowing an explosion was imminent. Diddy's carefully crafted public image was about to be obliterated in plain sight. While all eyes were glued to the unfolding drama inside the courtroom, something seismic was happening outside. Justin Bieber, the global superstar with over 270 million followers, dropped a social media bomb nobody saw coming. Right in the middle of trial proceedings, Bieber posted a powerful statement publicly declaring his support for Cassie. This wasn't just news, it was a Category 5 hurricane hitting the music industry and sending shockwaves directly into that courtroom.
Yeah. So, yeah. I just want to protect her, you know? I don't want her to lose it. I don't want her to, you know, go through anything I went through. I don't wish that upon anybody. So, yeah, if she ever needs me, I mean, just think about how young I was and so impressionable. And you have everybody telling me how awesome I am at all times, you know? And like,
yeah. It's like taking a kid and putting a kid in a room full of nothing but sweets.
Right.
And just saying, I'll be back in 2 days.
Exactly. I just want people to understand, like, the psychology behind why I potentially could have.
The impact was devastating, hitting hardest because of the deep intertwined history between Bieber and Diddy. For years, Diddy had publicly claimed a mentor role, a big brother figure in teenage Bieber's life. Remember those widely circulated videos of a young Bieber hanging out at Diddy's lavish parties? Diddy bragged about helping shape the kid's career, about having legal guardianship of him for brief periods when he was just 15, a detail that takes on a chilling new context today. This wasn't just casual acquaintance, it was a past relationship Diddy had leveraged for his own image. That history made Bieber's public statement feel like the ultimate unthinkable betrayal. Crucially, Bieber's post wasn't some vague expression of sympathy. He got specific, citing first-hand observations. He wrote about being present at industry parties and witnessing Diddy's alleged behavior toward Cassie. He mentioned seeing Diddy forcefully grab Cassie's arm at a 2015 after-party. He described seeing Diddy allegedly cut Cassie off mid-sentence and speak over her during interviews. These weren't hearsay or rumors. These were presented as personal accounts from a global icon, instantly lending massive credibility to Cassie's allegations. During the first court recess, the post spread like wildfire. People in the courthouse hallways clustered together, phones in hand, disbelief on their faces. Legal assistants scrambled to print screenshots for attorneys. Even jurors returning from the break looked visibly confused by the sudden surge of hushed conversations and frantic energy. The post itself included a powerful old photo, Bieber and Cassie at a music event years ago, both smiling, but Bieber's caption added a layer of poignancy. He wrote about always respecting Cassie's strength and expressed regret for not speaking up sooner.
Problems in my life.
Second time, let's talk about the fact that Combs' co-defendant in a civil case, a case, by the way, that accuses him and this co-defendant, another A-lister, of rape. This guy is once again slamming the attorney behind the case, insisting that he be sanctioned for allegedly not doing his job. We're talking, of course, about Sean Carter, better known as Jay-Z, once again calling out attorney Tony Busby, calling out his character, more specifically into question, claiming that the Texas attorney's filings have, quote, substantial. Now, we've talked about this before, but basically, a civil lawsuit was filed against Sean Combs on behalf of a Jane Doe who says that she was raped by Combs and another celebrity at a home after the Video Music Awards in 2000.
For Diddy, the timing was catastrophic. Bieber's hundreds of millions of followers saw the post instantly. News outlets were already churning out headlines. This wasn't just celebrity gossip anymore. It was a monumental figure taking a clear public side in an active trial, directly challenging Diddy's narrative. Court reporters went into overdrive. One woman literally sprinted out of the courtroom to call her editor. Another furiously typed on her laptop. A reporter from a major network mouthed, "Did you see it?" to his colleague across the aisle. Everyone knew in that moment that the trial had fundamentally shifted. The whispers grew so loud that a bailiff had to intervene, calling for quiet. People kept showing each other their phones, eyes wide, some glancing directly at Diddy, others at Cassie, who remained remarkably composed amidst the frenzy. What made Bieber's statement so impactful was its deliberate language. He called Cassie brave and truthful. He wrote that certain behaviors I witnessed years ago troubled me deeply, but I didn't understand the pattern they represented. He even included a line about being disappointed in myself for not recognizing the control dynamics that now seem so obvious. Diddy's attorney saw the post first. He immediately went into damage control mode, physically shielding Diddy's view of another lawyer's phone screen, whispering urgently to remove all devices from the table. But it was too late. Someone had already shown Diddy the screen. His eyes locked onto it, widening in disbelief. And in that split second, everyone everyone close enough watched his face undergo a horrifying transformation. When Diddy saw Bieber's post, it was like a switch flipped. The initial expression was one of pure, unadulterated shock. Eyes wide, mouth agape. Then, as the words registered, his eyebrows furrowed in a look of profound betrayal. But the truly terrifying part was witnessing that morph into unrestrained rage. His nostrils flared and his jaw clenched so tight, people nearby later claimed they could almost hear his teeth grinding. A woman sitting 3 rows back told reporters Diddy's hands began shaking uncontrollably. He tried to grab papers his lawyer offered, but his hands were trembling so badly he couldn't hold them. They slipped through his fingers and scattered across the floor. That's when the courtroom's gaze sharpened, everyone openly staring.
Yeah, I definitely feel protective of her. It was hard for me being that young and being in the industry and not knowing where to turn, and everyone, telling me they love me and, just turn their back on you in a second. So yeah, it's hard because I want her to know that, she can count on me, but at the end of the day, I'm never gonna force myself to be in a relationship with her. It has to be natural, right? So I just kind of, let her do her thing, and if she ever needs me, I'm gonna be here for her. But yeah, just protecting those moments because people take for granted.
I'm not even kidding. Watching that clip makes me emotional because he is saying so much without really saying anything. Protect Billie Eilish from what? From who?
The first major warning sign came when Diddy abruptly shot up from his chair. It wasn't a casual stretch, it was a sudden, aggressive movement. The bailiff, who had been watching him like a hawk all morning, immediately took a step forward, clearly experienced in handling volatile situations. Then Diddy spoke, his voice loud enough for the front rows to hear, laced with fury. "After everything I did for that kid," he seethed, "loyalty means nothing anymore." He muttered something else about consequences that caused his lawyer to physically grab his arm and yank him back into his seat. The lawyer whispered something urgent in his ear, but Diddy just shook his head violently. His breathing became heavy and labored, like someone hyperventilating after a physical exertion. Court sketches from that moment were eerily disturbing, capturing the bulging eyes, the clenched jaw, the veins standing out in his neck. One sketch artist commented she'd never drawn anyone looking so intensely enraged in her 12 years covering trials. The prosecutors weren't missing a beat. The lead prosecutor made a subtle hand signal to her assistant, who immediately got up and quietly exited the side door. Later, it was revealed this was a signal to prepare a specific witness earlier than planned, someone who could directly address the points Bieber had raised in his post. The security guards exchanged silent glances, 2 of them subtly shifting positions, moving closer to Diddy's table. One guard even unclipped something on his belt, not a weapon, but ensuring quick access if needed. Diddy's entire demeanor had fundamentally changed. The Mr. Cool, confident mogul of the morning was gone, replaced by a fidgeting, agitated figure running his hand over his face, loosening his tie as if it were choking him. Then came the defining moment of the breakdown. Diddy slammed his hand down on the table with a violent crack, sending a water glass flying. It shattered on the floor, the noise making people jump. As the room reacted, he whispered something the court reporters sitting nearby clearly heard, chilling in its intensity. "I'll make sure he never works in this town again. Neither of them will." His lawyer had to wrap an arm around Diddy's shoulders to physically hold him in his seat. The judge, her face grim, wasn't tolerating the disruption. She banged her gavel sharply and called for an immediate 15-minute recess. But the break offered Diddy no respite. It only gave him time to further stew in his rage, surrounded by his legal team whose faces screamed pure, unadulterated panic. Those 15 minutes proved to be exactly what Diddy didn't need. When court resumed, something about Cassie had shifted. She walked to the witness stand, not with the downcast gaze of day one, but with her shoulders back and head held high. She looked directly at the jury members, her gaze steady. She didn't avoid Diddy's eyes either. She simply looked through him, as if he were no longer significant enough to warrant her attention. Her testimony began, and the prosecution presented evidence that landed like a series of hammer blows. Text messages between Diddy and Cassie from years prior flashed onto the courtroom screens, prompting gasps from the gallery. In one exchange from 2016, Diddy had sent 17 consecutive messages demanding to know why she hadn't answered her phone. Another showed him demanding her precise location, down to the specific room number at a hotel. "I need to know where you are every minute," one chilling message read, followed by the explicit threat, That's the deal if you want to keep your career. The room grew so silent, the hum of the ceiling fans became audible as Cassie calmly described Diddy's alleged control over her professional interactions. He had a list of male artists I wasn't allowed to speak with unless he was present, she testified. Justin Bieber was one of them. When I asked why, he told me not to question him. When I did anyway, he grabbed my arm in front of everyone at the after party and whispered that I'd regret it. Cassie's voice remained steady, unwavering, a stark contrast to Diddy's earlier eruption. She spoke with quiet strength about feeling isolated, constantly monitored, and controlled. The patterns she described mirrored exactly what Justin Bieber had just shared online, making it seem as though their accounts were coordinated, even though Cassie testified she hadn't spoken to Bieber in years. When the prosecutor asked why she hadn't come forward sooner, her answer hit hard. "He told me nobody would believe me," she stated simply. "He said he controlled who worked in this industry and who didn't. I watched him make calls that ended people's careers." Two jurors visibly reacted, a woman wiping away tears, an older man writing something down and underlining it 3 times. The bombshell moment came when prosecutors played hotel security footage from 2018. The video showed Cassie trying to talk to a male artist in a hotel lobby. Then Diddy appeared, put his arm around her, and forcefully led her away, his body language matching her description of control perfectly. Diddy immediately leaned over to his lawyer, whispering frantically, pointing at the screen. Cassie continued, referencing specific events with remarkable detail, dates, locations, who was present. March 8th, 2017, at the Standard Hotel in New York. June 22nd, 2017, at his house in Miami. September 12th, 2018, backstage at the VMAs. Each date she named sent his lawyer frantically flipping through notes, his face growing paler. She mentioned that other potential witnesses, previously too afraid to speak up, were now contacting her lawyers after seeing Bieber's public support. "My phone hasn't stopped with messages from people saying they're ready to tell what they saw," she stated. A quiet but powerful statement that hung in the air. Then came the specific testimony that seemed to break Diddy completely. Cassie testified that after she once spoke to Bieber at an industry party years ago, Diddy allegedly pulled her aside and said, "Even Justin knows what happens to people who cross me." With Bieber now publicly supporting her, this historical threat suddenly looked incredibly damning, painting a clear picture of intimidation. As Cassie calmly continued laying out the alleged pattern of control, you could literally watch Diddy falling apart at the defense table. Each new detail that corroborated Bieber's statement or revealed his alleged threats made him fidget more, whisper more urgently to his lawyer, and look increasingly panicked. The confident music mogul was visibly crumbling before everyone's eyes. Just when it seemed the tension couldn't ratchet any higher, the prosecutor walked deliberately to the center of the courtroom, a folder in hand. "Your Honor," she announced, her voice firm, "we'd like to present evidence that directly contradicts Mr. Combmes' claim that Ms. Ventura fabricated these allegations recently." She connected her tablet to the courtroom display system. The screens around the room lit up, not with more recent evidence, but with text messages between Justin Bieber and Cassie Ventura from 2017. The prosecution zoomed in on a specific exchange that caused several jurors to lean forward in their seats, their eyes fixed on the screen. Cassie had written, "I don't know what to do anymore. He monitors everything," followed by, "He said if I talk to anyone, he'll make sure I never work again." Bieber's response, clear on the screen, read, "This isn't normal, Cass. What he's doing isn't okay. You need to talk to someone who can help." The instant those messages appeared, Diddy shot up from his chair with a loud scrape that echoed through the stunned courtroom. His face was bright red, eyes bulging with a mixture of rage and disbelief. The composed music mogul facade wasn't just cracked, it was completely shattered. His attorney grabbed his arm, desperately trying to pull him back down. "Sean, don't do this," he whispered, loud enough for the front rows to hear the panic in his voice. But Diddy was beyond listening. He actually shoved his lawyer's hand away with such force the man stumbled backward. "This is all lies," Diddy roared, pointing a trembling finger at Cassie. "You know DMN well that's not what happened. Where's your loyalty after everything I did for you?" His voice escalated with each word, filled with raw, unbridled fury. "You're making this all up, both of you." The judge immediately banged her gavel 3 times, the sharp reports cutting through the chaos. "Mr. Combmes, sit down immediately or I will have you removed." Her voice was ice cold, radiating authority, but Diddy wasn't stopping. Two security officers moved swiftly towards the defense table. One positioned himself between Diddy and Cassie, a silent, solid barrier, while the other approached Diddy from behind. Court reporters typed frantically, capturing every word of the unplanned meltdown. The jury watched in total shock. An older woman in the back row covered her mouth with her hand. A younger man in the front row physically leaned away from Diddy, creating distance. Your Honor, we need a recess, Diddy's lawyer shouted, trying desperately to regain control of the spiraling situation. But Diddy had turned towards the evidence screen, still shouting, "Those are fake. They fabricated those messages." He was gesturing wildly now, his voice echoing off the walls. "This is a setup. Justin never said that." The evidence was devastating precisely because it wasn't recent. These messages from 5 years prior completely contradicted any claim that Cassie invented allegations for money or fame. She had been confiding in Justin Bieber about the alleged control and threats years before any lawsuit was filed, long before the current storm. The judge slammed her gavel again, the sound demanding obedience. "Remove the jury immediately," she ordered the bailiff. As the 12 men and women filed out, their eyes remained fixed on Diddy, who was still standing, still shouting, surrounded by security. The guards moved in, one on each side, firm but controlled. "Sir, you need to calm down now," one said, placing a hand on Diddy's shoulder. For a tense moment, it looked like Diddy might resist, might even lash out at the officer. Instead, the fight seemed to drain out of him. He fell silent, breathing heavily, the reality of what just happened seeming to hit him like a physical blow. The damage was done. The carefully constructed, controlled image Diddy had presented to the world for decades had not just cracked, it had utterly shattered in front of everyone in the courtroom. And as security stood watch at his sides, the world got a glimpse of a very different side of the music mogul, one that made Cassie's allegations suddenly seem far more plausible, far more credible. With the jury safely out of the room, Judge Marlowe delivered a chilling smackdown from behind the bench. She stood, pointing directly at Diddy, her voice slicing through the heavy air. "Mr. Combmes, this is a court of law, not a recording studio. You do not control what happens here." Her authority filled the room. "One more outburst like that and I will hold you in contempt. You'll spend the remainder of this trial in a cell, making appearances only when necessary." She wasn't finished. The judge immediately ordered a psychiatric evaluation for Diddy to be completed before the next day's proceedings. Then she imposed new, severe security protocols. 2 officers would remain within arm's reach of Diddy at all times. His lawyers couldn't speak to him without an officer present. His phone privileges were completely revoked. Diddy's legal team huddled in the corner of the courtroom, looking like a football team that had just fumbled on their own goal line and was down by 40 points. The head attorney repeatedly shook his head, while another made frantic calls on a restricted line. A third lawyer was furiously scribbling notes, occasionally glancing up at Diddy with a face that screamed, "We are in deep shit." Their body language told the entire story. They knew their case had just taken a catastrophic hit, potentially irreparable damage done by their client's own actions. When the jury returned, their reactions were impossible to ignore. A middle-aged woman in the front row physically pulled her chair slightly away from the defense table. An older man who had meticulously taken notes throughout the trial now sat with his arms crossed, his pen untouched. Most telling was juror number 8, a young professional who had smiled politely at Diddy on day 1, but now wouldn't even look in his direction, his gaze fixed elsewhere. Meanwhile, the prosecution team maintained perfect poker faces, but you could see the quiet satisfaction in their eyes. The lead prosecutor calmly organized her papers, occasionally glancing at Diddy with a look that bordered on triumph. Her assistant couldn't resist hiding a small smile behind her hand at one point. Security didn't relent for the remainder of the day. 2 officers stood directly behind Diddy's chair, no longer attempting subtlety. Another remained posted at the courtroom door, hand resting on his belt. The message was crystal clear to everyone. They were not taking any further chances with Diddy's behavior. Legal experts watching from the gallery exchanged knowing whispers. A former federal prosecutor leaned over and muttered to the person next to him, "He just lost right there. Case is over." Law professors furiously scribbled notes, observing a live case study in how not to behave in court. One defense attorney from another high-profile case simply shook his head and muttered, "Amateur hour." Through it all, Cassie remained a picture of quiet strength and composure. She sat with perfect posture, hands folded calmly in her lap, her expression neutral. When Diddy had his violent outburst, she didn't flinch, didn't react, didn't give him the satisfaction of showing fear. The contrast between her complete control and his total lack of it couldn't have been more striking, more damning. As day 2 finally wrapped up, the difference from the morning was stark. Diddy had arrived strutting designer suit, confident smile. Now he shuffled out, tie loosened, surrounded by lawyers who looked like they'd aged a decade in a single afternoon. His eyes stayed fixed on the floor, avoiding the throng of reporters in the hallway. The most revealing moment came when his main lawyer tentatively placed a hand on his back to guide him out. Diddy shrugged it off, just like he had that morning. But this time, it wasn't an act of confidence. It was the gesture of a man defeated. What everyone witnessed in that courtroom wasn't just about legal arguments or evidence presentation. It was a raw, unfiltered look at character under extreme pressure. Cassie remained calm, composed, and strong in the face of her alleged abuser's rage. Diddy completely unraveled the moment Justin Bieber, a figure from his past he allegedly tried to control, unexpectedly stood by Cassie's side. Their true personalities were laid bare. Let's be real, the jury saw Diddy lose control, shout, slam things, and seemingly threaten people in open court. That moment, coupled with the damning evidence, likely sealed the fate of his image, if not the case itself. The biggest question now isn't just about the verdict, it's about who else, inspired by Justin Bieber breaking the unspoken code of silence, might now find the courage to walk through that newly opened door and speak their truth against Diddy.